"Sign this before you board," my mom said, as I rushed to my work trip. "It's just insurance." 3 days later, I discovered a $48, $700 safari charge, watched my family toasting elephants on Instagram, and realized I'd been groomed into footing their luxury bill. I never imagined a routine work trip would cost me more than a month's salary, but that's exactly what happened the moment my mom slid that insurance form across the kitchen island. I was late, bag half-zipped, Uber-ready, laptop charger slung over my shoulder when she insisted I sign without a second glance. Point 1, quick sign-off. In my rush to catch the flight, I treated the document like any standard liability waiver, scribbling my name as a courtesy rather than a contract. I trusted her calm assurance. "It's just insurance, sweetheart," and dismissed the fine print buried in paragraph 4, never pausing to consider the consequences. A few days later, halfway up Seattle's Space Needle on my way to a client dinner, my phone buzzed with a notification that froze me in place: a single transaction for $48, $700 from Royal Horizon Safaris, South Africa. Point 2. Blind trust shattered. My thumb fumbled to open Instagram, and there it was, my family champagne flutes raised in a luxury safari lodge, elephants drifting by in the dusk, mother and father beaming as though they'd been gifted the world. "Technically, it's your credit now," my dad purred in a voicemail that dripped with smug satisfaction. I stared at the screen, incredulous, not at the amount, but at the realization that I'd been groomed to fund their extravagance. As I texted back, "Cool. Can't wait to not pay it," I knew this was more than a one-off abuse. It was the culmination of years of sacrifice. Point 3. My sacrificial role. I had canceled friends' engagement parties, fielded emergency grocery requests, and fronted auto repairs for my sister, all because I believed family meant stepping in when they stumbled. I had been the rock-dependable, uncomplaining, always ready to bail them out. But this safari charge stripped away any illusion of goodwill. It exposed a patterned kindness, weaponized trust exploited, and boundaries trampled for the sake of family first. That Friday, I froze the card, called the bank, and filed a fraud claim, setting the stage for a reckoning they never saw coming. As I stood alone in that elevator reflection shimmering on glass walls, I realized a simple signature signed in haste, born of blind faith, had opened the door to a deep betrayal. And I vowed then that reclaiming my agency would be my next and most important journey. The moment my phone buzzed in that Seattle hotel elevator, the world tilted on its axis. I glanced down, expecting a routine notification, perhaps an updated itinerary or a restaurant confirmation, but instead saw a single massive debit, $48,700, labeled Safari Experience X12. Point 1, instantaneous disbelief. My thumb hovered over the screen as I replayed every recent interaction with calm disbelief. The insurance form Mom pressed into my hand. Dad's casual, "It's your credit now," remark. I felt my breath catch as I opened my banking app and watched the number drain from my account. $50,000 vanished in one merciless click. Point 2, the Instagram reveal. I tapped over to my feed, where a new reel from Cousin Jenny played on loop, elephants lumbering beneath a rose-gold sunset, champagne flutes clinking, and my parents' triumphant toasts in a luxury safari lodge halfway across the globe. The caption glowed, "When family means everything. Safari dreams." And I stared at their laughter like a stranger at a party where I'd never been invited. My heart pounded in my ears as I pieced together the scene. They had wined and dined on my dime while I toiled on a client project 7,000 miles away. And then came point 3, my father's voicemail, a smug chuckle over the greeting tone. "Well, technically, it's your credit now," he said, as though he'd just delivered an anniversary gift instead of hijacking my entire life savings. There was no apology, no remorse. Only that familiar condescension I'd grown used to in family emergencies. In that hushed elevator, tight between two mirrored walls, I realized the depth of their betrayal. This wasn't a one-off request for help. It was the culmination of years of grooming me to act as the family's invisible ATM. The doors slid open, and I stepped out into the lobby with the weight of $48,700 pressing on my shoulders. I didn't shout, I didn't weep. I simply texted back, "Cool. Can't wait to not pay it." Then I called my bank, filed a fraud report, and watched the card freeze within hours, canceling their stolen adventure before it even began. But the shock lingered, not just in the cold numbers on my statement, but in the realization that family help can sometimes feel like a trap, and that reclaiming your own agency often starts with a single courageous no. I began to see the safari charge not as a one-off betrayal, but as the final crescendo in a long, insidious symphony of manipulation. It started innocently: Mom's Monday morning texts. "Sweetheart, Dad's freelance work is delayed again. Could you float us $200 for groceries? We'll pay you back, promise." Without pause, I'd transfer the funds, trusting family emergencies over my own budget. Then a few weeks later, another request: "Emma, I hate to ask, but can you help me switch my flight? My card got declined." Each just this once favor felt reasonable at the moment, a natural extension of my role as the rock of the family. But in hindsight, I realized those small withdrawals of time, money, and energy were the grooming steps that led to this grand safari heist. Compliments became part of the trap, Dad's voice soft on the phone. You always bail us out when things fall apart, honey. We don't know what we'd do without you." What sounded like gratitude was really leash and lock. Every heartfelt thank you cemented the expectation that my kindness was currency they could spend. But it wasn't until I dug out the form Mom had pressed into my hand, before my flight buried in paragraph 4 of that so-called insurance agreement, that the full picture emerged. I had unknowingly granted them access to my accounts for any reasonable emergency family expenses. A vague phrase that gave them carte blanche to drain my savings. When I saw those words printed on the paper, I felt the chill of realization they weren't caretakers or emergency contacts. They were the undersigned owners of my credit. The just insurance line was the bait, the fine print was the hook, and the safari. That was the last grand performance in which they literally toasted their luxury trip on my dime elephants on screen, champagne in hand, and me 7,000 miles away watching through Instagram reels. In that moment, I understood that what they called love was really a series of demands wrapped in kindness, each favor another brick in the prison of obligation. Recognizing those patterns, incremental grooming, weaponized praise, and a fine print trap gave me the clarity to fight back. I froze the card, filed a fraud claim, and vowed never again to let family first become family takes everything. I knew that if I was going to confront my family, I needed more than anger, I needed irrefutable proof. So I set out to gather every piece of evidence I could find. First, the financial trail. I pulled up my bank statements and downloaded 12 months of wire transfers, $10,000 labeled anniversary venue deposit, $200 for emergency florals, and then that single shocking $48, $700 line item for Safari Experience X12. I printed each page with clear annotations, date amount description, and a simple header reading unauthorized family expenses. Next, I turned to my phone, combing through texts and voicemails. I extracted the recording of my dad's smug message. "Well, technically it's your credit now," and the desperate group chat memes where my cousin joked, "He'll cover the next one too," complete with heart and laughing emojis. Then came the most damning audio, the voice memo I'd secretly recorded the night before my trip, capturing my mom and sister whispering by the kitchen island, Mom's calm voice declaring, "It's just for insurance," and my sister's laugh as she called me a function, not a guest. I edited the clip so each incriminating phrase stood alone, burned copies to a thumb drive, and transcribed the dialogue into a neat document. To them, their social media bragging was harmless, so I piled up screenshots of Instagram reels, elephants drifting by champagne toasts, parents grinning under safari thatches, all tagged with Sma and Blessed and Rayamran safari dreams, though I'd never been invited. I also gathered the fine print insurance form Mom had rushed me through at the airport, scanning paragraph 4, where I had unknowingly granted parental access to my accounts for any reasonable family expenses. Finally, I captured a screenshot of the WhatsApp thread where Emma had slipped up, thanks to our favorite little sponsor she'd texted, proving they knew exactly what they'd done. With binder in hand, each page labeled and tabbed financial, audio, digital, legal. I transformed my scattered suspicions into a coherent evidence archive. Holding that folder, I felt a new power surging through me. No longer would I be the silent safety net. I would be the author of my own reckoning. The day I laid that meticulously curated proof on the Marble Island, conversations would end and accountability would begin. Because when you document every slight, every forged clause, every exploitative favor, you build the strongest case for your own worth and the clearest path to freedom. By the time I'd assembled my evidence archive, I was ready to turn proof into action, so I picked up the phone and called my bank, my voice steady, as I reported the safari charge as unauthorized fraud. Within hours, they froze my card and sent a cancellation notice to Royal Horizon Safaris, effectively unbooking the luxury trip I'd unwillingly funded. Watching their safari vanish before my eyes felt like the first real taste of justice. But financial pushback alone wouldn't repair the breach of trust, so I reached out to the lawyer I'd worked with on a tenant dispute. She sent me a fraud affidavit template and coached me on drafting a full reversal request, complete with a cease and desist letter demanding they cease any further withdrawals. I signed and emailed it to my parents, no threats, just clear legalese stating that any further charges would be met with immediate litigation. Next, I posted a stark black screen on Instagram with white text, "Family doesn't mean free access, this is my money, not your safety net." That single post garnered hundreds of comments and minute solidarity from strangers who'd been tapped as family ATMs and encouragement from friends who had witnessed my silent sacrifices. Encouraged, I filed the official fraud claim with my state's attorney general, attaching my evidence archive as supporting documentation. The prosecutor's office responded within days to say they'd opened an investigation into potential identity theft and coercion. Meanwhile, my lawyer dispatched a certified letter to my parents outlining the legal consequences if the funds weren't repaid within 10 days. I felt a rush of clarity as I clicked, "Send, no more silent rescues, no more just this once loopholes." The credit freeze held the safari booking remained canceled, and the legal wheels began to turn. For the first time in years, I knew I wasn't just the family's rock. I was a person with rights and recourse. And as I watched the final notification pop up, charge fully reversed, I allowed myself a small, triumphant smile. This wasn't just about recouping $48 of $700, it was about sending a clear message that manipulating love for financial gain is fraud, and that sometimes the only way to protect your peace is to marshal the law and your finances in your own defense. I chose the city zoo for our face-to-face, not a neutral office or a cramped cafe, but a place where wild creatures roamed behind bars, and I'd be hard-pressed to spot a more fitting arena for a family showdown. I arrived early, sat on a green bench beside the lion enclosure, and waited beneath the hum of excited children and the distant barks of sea lions. When Mom, Dad, and Emma finally approached Mom in her safari khakis, Dad shading his eyes with aviator sunglasses, Emma clutching her phone like a lifeline, I rose and set my evidence archive on the bench between us. "Thanks for coming." Mom began, her tone too bright for the knot in my stomach, but I raised a hand. "Let's not waste time." Without breaking eye contact, I slid over the first binder pages of bank statements annotated in bold, each one a wire transfer for groceries, flight changes, and then that final unauthorized $48, $700. As Mom's smile faltered, I tapped play on my phone. Their voices crackled through the small speaker, Mom's calm assurance. "It's just insurance," followed by Emma's mocking laugh. He didn't even read it. Their posturing dissolved as the audio replayed in this public space. Strangers paused to stare. Strollers rolled to a halt. I let that moment linger before unfolding the next folder, screenshots of champagne-clinking safaris, WhatsApp memes calling me our favorite little sponsor, and finally the forged insurance clause granting them license to drain my account. Emma's phone hit the bench with a clatter. Dad's arms crossed, posture rigid. "You recorded us?" Mom's voice trembled, betraying her composure. "No," I said, voice steady. "I just captured what you freely broadcast online." I laid out the forged contract, the cease and desist letter, the fraud affidavit. "You've got 10 days to make this right before I hand everything to my lawyer," I concluded, standing tall as the lions roared behind their mesh walls. Dad barked, "You're making a scene." But I shook my head. "The scene started when you took my money and turned it into your safari party." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving them speechless among the cotton candy stalls and peacock struts. As I passed families feeding ducks in the pond, I felt lighter, no longer the family's ATM, but a woman who'd reclaimed her worth in the wildest of theaters, proving that sometimes the only way to break free is to confront those who think you're tame. In the wake of our lion enclosure confrontation, I expected a quiet aftermath, but instead, I found myself caught between unexpected allies and fierce backlash. Almost immediately, Aunt Laura called, her voice brimming with pride. "You did what needed doing. No one should rob their own child." Megan, ever my confidant, dropped by with a care package of tea and a note reading, "You reminded me to honor my own worth." Thank you. Even my godmother, whose messages usually come in the form of a single line, sent a heartfelt text, "I'm here whenever you need an ear." Complete strangers chimed in on my Instagram post, sharing stories of invisible sacrifices, caregivers who took on mounting medical bills, siblings who quietly funded college tuitions never acknowledged. Comments flooded in, "You're seen now. Your story gave me courage." And suddenly I wasn't alone in my fight. But as my circle of support grew, so did the backlash. Dad's phone calls turned menacing, his usual authoritative tone dipped into thinly veiled threats. "Keep this up, and you'll see what family really means." Emma resorted to social media smears, posting a cryptic black screen story that read, "Some children repay love with lawsuits, complete with mar betrayal and emojis." Cousin Mark even whispered to mutual relatives that I was overreacting, trying to make them look bad in public, and Uncle Richard advised me to just drop it before you ruin Christmas. Their dismissal stung because it echoed the gaslighting I'd endured for years. My dependability reframed as entitlement. My defensive boundaries spun into selfishness. Amid the storm, local reporters reached out, intrigued by my unorthodox showdown in the zoo and the detailed evidence archive I'd published online. Community blogs picked up the story, praising my courage and criticizing the family's exploitation. I accepted a $25,000 grant from the Creative Impact Fund to develop a documentary seating arrangements, and suddenly my personal crisis had become a platform for countless others to reclaim their narratives. Women's support groups invited me to speak about emotional labor, and elder care organizations asked how to protect family caregivers from financial abuse. Through the mingled chorus of praise and condemnation, one truth emerged. When you refuse to suffer in silence, you cast a spotlight that both illuminates the shadows and forces accountability. Allies reminded me that autonomy is worth fighting for, while backlash only underscored the very abuse I refused to accept. In this convergence of solidarity and strife, I found my power not in escaping conflict, but in standing firm, turning betrayal into a movement that honors every invisible act of love. After the dust settled, I realized that reclaiming my finances was only the first step in rebuilding my life on my own terms. The bank wired back each installment, $18,000, then $2,300, and finally $9 to $400 each notification, a small victory against the family help that had become coercion. I didn't celebrate with champagne. Instead, I watched my account balance climb toward the threshold it had been before the Safari debacle, feeling a surge of relief rather than triumph. With the funds returned, I quietly closed every shared line credit cards, automatic bill pay, even emergency contact permissions. I sent one succinct email to the bank. Please remove parental access from all accounts, and within days I had a clean slate. Next, I turned to personal reinvention. I rented a modest office space in a downtown co-working hub and commissioned a minimalist plaque for the door open by appointment only. On the wall inside, I hung a framed line from my own notes, rebuilt without borrowed blood. I changed my phone number, erased old family group chats, and set up two-factor authentication on everything. I booked a short getaway to a mountain cabin alone and reveled in the silence, eating dinner by candlelight and reading a novel without checking my email once. I rediscovered small pleasures. Sunday farmers markets, early morning jogs, and cooking recipes I hadn't had time for when I was everyone's 24/7 support line. Most importantly, I embraced emotional freedom. I learned to say no, not with apology, but with clarity. I'm not available for that. When a former client called on a weekend, I declined kindly and went for a walk instead. When friends invited me to gather, I chose those who uplifted rather than demanded. I poured my energy into a new project, a consulting brand that specialized in helping caregivers and crisis managers set healthy boundaries and found fulfillment in empowering others to protect their own peace. Rebuilding on my own terms taught me that freedom isn't free. It's reclaimed through boundaries, self-respect, and intentional choices. I learned that financial restitution matters, but emotional restitution is priceless. As I sit in my new office, sunlight filtering through the blinds, I feel steadier than ever. The past still whispers sometimes, but now I listen with compassion, not fear. I have redesigned my life with a single guiding principle: love yourself enough to never be someone's ATM again, and to know that the one seat you always deserve is your own. Standing here, having watched my parents' safari dreams evaporate and reclaimed every cent they tried to steal, I feel a fierce sense of clarity and relief wash over me. No longer am I the family ATM, the default yes to every last-minute request or emotional plea. Instead, I'm the architect of my own peace, the guardian of my boundaries, and the author of my worth. That signature I hastily scrawled on just insurance formed the trigger for a family reckoning, but what followed was my awakening, recognizing kindness weaponized as coercion, documenting each betrayal, and using legal and financial tools to restore my autonomy. I learned that true love doesn't ask you to bleed in silence or sacrifice your stability. It celebrates your strength and respects your limits. Now I wake up without dread at every phone ping, savoring simple joys, a quiet walk, an uninterrupted dinner, the knowledge that my generosity is a choice, not an obligation. If you've ever felt drained by invisible demands or found yourself footing a family bill, you never agreed to know you're not alone, and that reclaiming your agency is both possible and empowering. Share your story in the comments below. Let's build a community that honors self-respect over silent sacrifice. And if you believe that every voice deserves to be heard and every boundary deserves respect, subscribe and click the bell for more real-life tales of resilience, boundary setting, and the power of saying no, so you can finally say yes to yourself.